This is Mind Wars. I'm Chris Ryan, and on today's show, we've got Grace Weston and we've got Lennon. Grace is a truly remarkable story to tell us today, where she was literally given 14 days to live. She was sent home to die, in other words. Lennon is a healer from Ireland who, for decades now, who's been healing people around the world, both humans and animals, I'd like to add. I'd like to welcome them both on the show today, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We're delighted to be on your show.
So after the intro, I'm sure it's going to intrigue a few people, Grace, about your story itself, as to how you're remarkably still talking to me here today with a beautiful smile on your face, and how you haven't vanished after 14 days. So where did it all go wrong, or go right, should I say?
Well, I suppose the only reason I am here is thanks to Lennon and his great work. But starting from the beginning, I played with Laois, county football at a very high level, won in All Ireland at 16, and then I developed shin splints. So I played football in Camogie, trained a lot every day, and when I was about 18 and 19, developed shin splints, and at 19, 20, they decided that I needed an operation. My shin splints were so bad that I actually couldn't stand or walk. I was heavily medicated to play sport. So the drug that is actually off the market now is the one that I was prescribed to be able to stay playing. Alling, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it.
No, I can't say I have.
Well, it's taken off the market for the problems it caused. And then, so I used to take it before training, in the middle of training and after training. And the same if I had to play a match. It was prescribed to me to take beforehand, at halftime and afterwards, just to be able to get through the 60 minutes.
And did you feel any side effects yourself by taking that?
I suppose before I had the procedure, I was in a lot of pain. It was unbearable. My legs were completely swollen, my feet were swollen, and I used to be carried off the pitch at the end. I could no longer stand. So I don't know whether you would say that I was foolish to stay going at that level and put myself to that much torture, but for me, sport and football was my life. It is what I had done from a very young age, and all I wanted to do was play at all costs accordingly. So I decided when I met the consultant, I wanted to get back playing as soon as I could. And he had a look, he tested my legs and decided the only way was an operation. So at 19 years of age, you don't really think of the consequences. You think, yeah, I'll go have this procedure. I'll be back playing in 3 months is what he told me. But unfortunately, that didn't happen.
And was it a rare occasion that, you had shin splints and for this great ordeal to unravel afterwards?
According to the medics or the consultants, the operation went well. So basically the operation was compartment syndrome on both legs. So they opened up my shin and they removed the fascia that holds the calf muscle together on both legs.
Okay.
So I stayed in hospital for one night. The physio came in the following day, asked me to get up out of the bed to see if I could walk after the procedure, and I fell against a wall. I was then wheeled out in a wheelchair to the car and told, you obviously need crutches, but they're an extra €50 if you want them. So I couldn't walk at this stage.
Wow.
So
maybe you should tell them a little bit about compartment syndrome, if you can.
is it?
Perhaps. I think you're doing very, very well there at the moment. So compartment syndrome was practiced perhaps for 20 years, 25 years as a treatment for shin splints. It's no longer used at the moment. I think we had some medical information recently to say that the procedure has been
it's no longer done.
no longer used. So
whether I was a guinea pig and it failed miserably with me, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But they don't do it anymore. So I was to be back playing after 3 months, and I started to develop other problems. So I developed stomach problems, bowel problems, chronic pain all over. I thought the pain was meant to reduce after the procedure, but it didn't. I was meant to be back jogging and playing fully in 3 months, but I was only at that stage back kind of going for short walks. And every time I would go and try to train or do anything with exertion, I would either pull a muscle or I would develop more problems. So this gradually continued, and I got to the point where I wasn't even able to intake any food. Anytime I had food, I would get sick. So after this went on for a period of time, they thought I had cancer. So I was checked for cancer a number of times because I lost so much weight. But yet nobody knew what was causing the problem. Nobody kind of pinned it back to the operation. Everybody knew, all the doctors knew that I had the procedure, but nobody kind of said anything. And the consultant that did the operation said it was nothing got to do with the operation. My operation was a success, even though I was in chronic pain 24/7 with my legs.
But the operations or the scans that you had proved or showed or must have showed that they're detected cancer. Did they treat you for it?
Well, I had been tested a couple of times, and then for my stomach, and they also did my kidneys. They thought maybe I had developed a back injury of some sort. So I went for an MRI in my back and went to see the consultant a few days later. And I was actually on my own at this stage. And she turned around and said, "Look, Grace, hold on, I need to speak to another consultant." So I sat in the room on my own, and she came back in and she said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but we found a tumor on your kidneys." And I was a bit shocked. Wasn't expecting it, but didn't take too much notice of it either. She was like, "Look, you have to be back in here on Sunday morning for a series of tests. We think that this is your problem." I had already been diagnosed with arthritis at this stage, and I had went into the Gala clinic for a week of tests. I lost a lot of weight during that time, and at the end of it, they told me maybe it was just an artifact on the scan.
But did they treat you?
Not that
your
time.
Kidneys?
No.
In the aftermath of the scan, which proved that there was a problem with your kidneys, were you treated?
No.
No.
I was sent home from hospital after the week, after deteriorating even, and they said, "Look, we don't know what it is, it must be an artifact," and was sent home from hospital with no answers.
And how many years ago was all this?
Well, I was only 19.
Yeah.
This time. I'm 35 now.
Right.
So, and so continued. I went back and tried to play, and I gradually just got worse, and then I developed lung problems. So for somebody that was super fit, I now was short of breath, struggling to run. I was swelling up with fluid retention and was getting absolutely no answers.
And how was this, even on your own, obviously, mental health, physical health, must be very extremely stressful, but then obviously for your family and everybody around you as well, how was that coping mechanism, or how did you kind of cope going through all these frustrating processes? You thinking they're telling you kind of, okay, operations went okay, this went okay, but you knew inside something was completely not okay.
Yeah, that was the hardest part out of all of this, and not knowing what was wrong, and knowing that you were deteriorating every day, but that you were going to experts after experts, and they would do test after test. And I was getting certain diagnoses, like they would decide, right, okay, you have now developed this problem and we'll give you treatment. So I developed kidney disease after that. So after leaving that clinic, a number of months later, I went to Laois Football actually sent me to another doctor because they were so concerned. Like I wouldn't have been able to run around a kitchen.
But if you developed kidney disease after the test, which showed up on the MRI, and then they said that this was an artifact, and then you had kidney disease, this is rather a strange type of diagnosis.
Yeah, but bear in mind, I had been to this was on the third consultant for my kidneys.
Okay.
So one consultant actually told me I was just fat and to go home and get used to it. I was probably about 8 stone.
Wow.
Yeah, I would put up about 2 or 3 stone just in fluid alone, especially if I trained or did any exertion at all. The fluid would increase straight away. I was rushed into hospital for it, and I met a consultant, and he was the one that told me to go home, that there was no fluid retention on my body. I was sent back in again the following day by the football doctor, and they threatened to send me to a hospital in Dublin if he didn't examine me properly. So he sent down a junior consultant to examine me. When I met her, actually, she gave out to me for wasting their time as to why I should actually present myself again. So she examined me and discovered that, yes, there was fluid retention all over my body and that I shouldn't have been released, that I should be admitted straight away. So I was admitted to the hospital. The senior consultant came up and greeted me that evening, told me he was doing no further tests with me and I could sit there for the bank holiday weekend in hospital and that nobody would be coming near me. The only problem I had was I was anemic.
Okay.
So I rang my mum and I said, you know what, I'm not sitting here for a weekend. You can come and take me home. And I was sent again to another hospital. And when I went for more tests to the other hospital, I was diagnosed. Well, actually, the way the doctor put it was, you have what Jonah Lomo has, which was chronic kidney disease. And I presume he just said that because I was so sporty and knew who he was referring to. And obviously, Jonah Lomo has since passed away of kidney failure. So I was stopped from all sport, all activity again, and I started treatment for chronic kidney disease.
How long did that last?
I was on that treatment for weeks. I was taken off at them because it decided maybe your kidneys are back working again. But the symptoms hadn't changed, the hardness hadn't left, the fluid retention hadn't left. Everything was the same except for their figures. So I was then admitted to hospital for 10 days for a series of tests. Lyme disease was one, Guillain-Barré, all of those. They all came back clear. They then decided that I must have a muscle wasting disease. And they did more biopsies, cut open my leg again, took a biopsy from my muscle. That came back clear. And I was no better. I was sent home again with no answers, just to get on and live your life as best as you could. I would try to go back training and playing football because it's all I wanted to do. Plus, mentally, it kept me going to be involved with the team and to get out and about. I wasn't just trying to stay at home and hide away, even though I suppose everybody expected you to be able to play at the level that I was at, which for me was quite hard. I pushed and pushed and pushed, probably too much. But when you can't tell somebody or a manager or your friends what exactly is wrong, their opinions change. So they're like, well, if they can't find out what's wrong with you, well, then there mustn't be anything now. So come on back in and train full bang. And that's kind of what happened on several occasions. And I deteriorated rapidly after that, to the point that I needed support and help from my parents when I was walking. I would not be able to catch my breath walking around the kitchen, and I would, I suppose, you would think I was a 90-year-old woman trying to get around. And I was rushed into the doctor, our own GP, one day, and he asked me would I go for another second opinion, that he had sent me to so many and nothing was coming back. So he asked me would I attend another GP friend of his that same day, which I did. When I went in and actually had a consultation with her, and she examined me while I was just sitting in the chair, and she was like, look, you seem fine to me, there doesn't seem to be any problems. And before I left, she was like, will you just do one thing for me? Will you just walk to the gate and come back in, straight into me? So I said, yeah, fine, I'll try. And because I had explained that on sitting and not moving and doing anything, I seem okay, except for the fluid retention and the exhaustion and fatigue. So I walked to the gate, came back in, and she started to panic because my heart levels all changed. I got really weak, and she asked me then to hang on. She wanted to go out and have a discussion with my own GP privately. So she came back in, called my parents in, and she said, look, Grace, I'm really worried for you. I don't think you should be out of hospital. I think you should be in hospital straight away. And she said, you need 24-hour care. And at this point, she was like, I'm afraid for you walking by yourself in case you drop dead suddenly. So there was a bit of a change and a bit of a U-turn from being okay to, okay, now I'm not walking.
And what set off the alarm bells that day? Was it simply your heart rate went extremely high from just walking that, couple of meters or so maybe to the gate and back? And that's what said straight away, no.
And the shortness of breath, I just could not catch my breath.
Well, it's strange that all this and couldn't have been detected over the years. They came up with positives from heart, lungs, kidneys, stomach, gynae as well. You've got to go through that as well. You couldn't eat. And so why, in my opinion, I think this is strange why you were shown to have serious problems and there was literally nothing done about it.
No, nothing. So maybe a few years has passed at this stage. You're talking about maybe 3 years has passed at this stage. And this is the condition I'm left in. So I was rushed into, the consultant that diagnosed me with kidney disease is who they made contact with. So he rushed me into hospital the following morning at 9 o'clock. And they thought that I had developed clots in my lungs and they were concerned about me. But when they rushed me into hospital, they actually, I think I was only 23 or 25 at this stage, and they put me into a ward with both patients dying either side of me with cancer. And I didn't know what was wrong. So we did some x-rays on my lungs. They came back clear. We were back in the same boat. Look, we don't know what's wrong with you. So we got onto my lungs and we did a respiratory test. And I had done an echo and different tests on my heart. So while going for the respiratory test, as you can imagine, some of the hospitals are obviously quite large in Dublin.
Yep.
So I had to leave my bed, not in a wheelchair, walk with a technician to do a respiratory test, which was actually the VO2 max. And if you're not familiar with that, it's on a bike, pedaling as fast as you can go, and they will check your levels. So what happened was I would be really, really cold and I was completely exhausted from the walk. I was out of breath, couldn't catch my breath. And the technician on the walk down said, look, you're putting this on. You can't be that bad. And I said, well, this is the reason I'm in here and it's the reason I'm going for this test with you, is to find out what is causing it. So we sat down to do the test and he couldn't actually get the oxygen levels on my finger. Do you know when they put the little monitor on? So he got 2 cups of boiling water and he got my hands and he stuck my hands into the cups. And he was like, that'll get the circulation obviously going in my hands, but it didn't. And he still couldn't read. But do you know what he did? He put the monitor on his own finger and my test results came back perfect.
Wow.
So what you're saying here is that this wasn't your test at all.
So how could it have been? I was just pedaling on a bike and the monitor was on his hand, not mine. So it was just for the oxygen level. It wasn't for anything else. So we went back up to the room. I had done the heart test prior to this and I had a junior consultant came to me and he said, look, Grace, we have found your problem. And I said, happy days. We know what's wrong. And he said, there's a blockage on your heart. And I said, okay, right, that's fine. Accepted it, kind of going, right, we know what to do now. and I'll be fixed and back out and living life again. So that was fine. And that evening, 2 hours later, the respiratory consultant came to see me. And she had seen me already in another hospital. And I had been sitting on my bed working because I was self-employed at this stage. I had actually set up my own consultancy and I was working away. And she told me that she had actually students with her, medical students with her. She didn't pull back the curtains so nobody else could hear the conversation, and I was on my own. And she said, look, I've met you already. There's nothing wrong with you. You were using this as an excuse not to play football or sport and not to work.
Wow. It's incredible somebody in a so-called professional field would say that to you as well. Even the doctor beforehand telling you, you're only putting this on. I mean, wow. Yeah.
So I had been rushed in on a Friday. My club team were in a county final on the Sunday. And the first question I asked when I met the consultant is, can I be released just to watch the game? And he said, look, if there's nothing too serious that we find by then, yes, we'll let you go. And I got out, was practically carried back in. And this lady then tells you, you want an excuse. And I said, look, I've had a consultant in just 2 hours ago that told me that he found a blockage in my heart. And she said, her reply was, I haven't even looked at your notes. So she actually had to go back out to the nurse's station. She read my notes, came back in, and she said, yes, that is the start of a blockage on your heart, but I'm telling you here and now, we'll be doing nothing about it.
What was your reaction when a professional tells you, yes, we can see it's coming to a blockage in your heart, according to their notes, but we're absolutely going to do nothing about it?
Well, you know, at that stage, I was extremely weak. When I got up out of bed, I would fall nearly to the wall with tiredness and dizziness and fatigue, everything that went along with the problems. I would struggle even going from my bed to the toilet, and the two ladies either side of me were concerned about me because they could hear how bad I was. And they were sitting aghast that somebody was talking to me like this. But I had no strength, no energy, no nothing to fight back. What do you say when you're only 23 or 25 and someone is intimidating in a powerful position and you have people standing around your bed the same age as you just looking at you and somebody's saying, it's all in your head?
But previous to all this, you had been diagnosed with kidney problems, with cancer, possible. You had been diagnosed with a lung problem, a cardiovascular problem. You had been diagnosed with a gynae problem. How could anyone say that you're putting this on when all the records were available? All your specialist had to do was to go to the station, pick up your records, and everything was in front of you.
Nobody was marrying anything together. So you see a different consultant for each problem in a different hospital, and like the gynae consultant was like, we don't know what's wrong. Yeah. And that's it. And it gets forgotten about. And nobody else brings it in as an entire picture or the entire body. So what happened was she told me there and then she was taking it out of my own consultant's hands and she was going to see the cardiologist, the senior cardiologist, because he was going to have to give permission on what happens next. And she clearly did that because she wrote in my notes that it was in my head. And my own consultant came into me that evening and he said that, look, Grace, it's been reported that it's in your head. And he's like, clearly, I know it's not, you can clearly see it. But because of what she has done, you are going to have to go and see psychologists now because we cannot let you out of hospital until this program.
Wow.
So,
but you were one patient treated in this manner over how many years?
So
3, 4, 5 at this stage?
Yeah, at this stage, yeah.
How many others out there were treated in a similar way?
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask you, Grace, was you must have felt so alone and isolated at the time with the problem you're having, sick and not getting answers. I know you were saying 23, 25, you know, what I suppose, were you looking at stuff yourself, doing your own investigation, say, hang on a second, am I the only person here? Surely you would have mentioned to a few doctors, say, look, is there other people like me as well, or am I kind of once-off case, or how did that kind of unfold for you as well? Your family, I'm sure, were inquiring into this as well.
Yeah. But what happened was the following day, I was marched down to see a psychologist, and I spent an hour and a half with the first person, and he just took notes, just wrote everything I said. And one of the questions, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, he was like, you look like you want to be in here. You have a smile on your face. And I just couldn't get over it. And I said, you go out and spend one night with those two ladies either side of me dying, and you'll see who'll be smiling. I know I'm getting out in a couple of days. Whatever the outcome is, I'm still leaving here. But when you see two ladies dying either side of you with no hope, you don't think you're too bad then.
Yeah.
And that was his, and he just sent me back to my room. But you had a second one. A second meeting with another psychologist. Yeah. And the first guy wanted to ring my friends. So he wanted me to list my friends down. And he was like, can I have their phone numbers? I want to ring them and confirm that you have friends. Now, for anybody out there that knows or is involved in sport, you would think that is a joke and you would take the piss straight away.
Of course, yeah.
So I was like, there's no way. My friends would hang me out to dry thinking this is something. I was like, there's no way you're getting any numbers or any. I was like, the only people you can contact is my parents.
Yeah. What happened when you organised for mum and dad to come in, or dad, to a meeting?
I had the second meeting with the second psychologist, and he turned around and he said, look, there's clearly nothing wrong with you mentally. He was like, they just haven't a clue what is wrong with you, and now they're using this as their next step.
Well, I think that was a wise decision.
And then?
From him, at least. He acknowledged there was nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
And, gave you the all clear that psychologically you were okay.
He said, I'm approving you and practically giving you a cert to say mentally you're grand.
Okay.
Good.
But if you
start.
want to get a counselor for anything, you can have it. He's like, I have to say that. But they rang home. The first guy rang home. And luckily, my father answered the phone, the wrong person for the psychologist to get. But his first words were, is Grace suffering from a mental disorder? And what mental disorders are in the family?
This was doctor questioning your dad?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So my father obviously wasn't very happy. And he demanded a meeting with all of them. He said, I want
You mean the entire team?
The entire team. Anybody that had met me and had any dealings with me, he wanted a meeting with them all in the one room to figure out what is going on. Yeah, sure. Because of what they were doing and the way that they were speaking to me on my own. None of them would show up.
Of course.
I was to have follow-up tests done before leaving the hospital on my lungs, respiratory ones. All got cancelled. I was sent home straight away out of the hospital after my father demanded a meeting. So I left the hospital no further on in a terrible state, really. And at that stage, I was probably completely fed up of the situation and didn't want to go back near them at all. And I just said, whatever way this pans out, I just couldn't deal with going through all of that again. So I gave myself another break to try and recover a little bit, went back to sport again and struggled again. And I was back with the consultants yet again. I was back for a follow-up call, meeting with my own kidney consultant. So he said, look, Grace, we don't know what is wrong with you. And he's like, I don't know where to send you, because all of the consultants here in Ireland that look for a second opinion send their patients to me. So I have nowhere to send you now. So I asked him one question. I said, what happened to the diagnosis of a blockage in my heart. And he was like, oh, I don't remember any of that. And I said, well, check your notes. Mm-hmm. So he went to the computer, looked, no mention of my heart. They had
Wiped from the system.
Wiped from the system. The entire thing was gone. And that was the last I ever seen of him. He wiped me off his books as well, saying, I don't know where to send you, and you may just get on with it now. That was it. Back to my own GP, who looked up more consultants and was back on the conveyor belt of, right, more testing and more consultants, and back to square one.
And while all this was going on, were you put on a lot of medication in between and you know, all the way through?
And started, yeah, exactly. So we'll do a program of treatment, and we'll give you this, and then we'll take you off it, and we'll go again.
How many tablets were you on?
Well, during this time, I was only mainly on the treatment for my kidney disease.
Okay.
And then I pulled off all of that. And then when I met another professor, myself and my mother went to the appointment, and we basically told him the scenario. And he said, look, if all of these intelligent people couldn't help you, what do you expect me to do for you? And we were like, we've been just sent to you. Like.
But on the other hand, you were on 28 tablets a day towards the end, and being treated for literally every condition imaginable. Yeah. And yet you were making no progress.
No. So he wouldn't take me on, and then sent me home, but realised on the way home that he copped that I had health insurance. Got a call from his secretary to say, actually, you've been booked in for a week. You'd swear you were going to a hotel for...
What's this? Which in the
Beacon, yeah.
All right, okay.
Booked in for a week of tests.
Lovely, yeah.
I think I met the consultant once when I arrived in the first 2 days. And
did they do tests?
They did tests. I was brought back in a wheelchair after doing a VO2 max. A doctor was present, and I collapsed in the middle of doing the test. So my parents were with me that day, and I walked down to do the test, and I was carried back in a wheelchair, lifted out of the wheelchair and into a bed. The doctor that was present said that I was seriously ill that day, and something needed to be done before something happened to me. And she suggested a meeting take place with all the consultants that were dealing with my case. The following morning at 7 o'clock, I received a phone call beside the bed, the phone, and the consultant rang to say, you're being released now, you can go on home, you can ring your parents.
Wow.
That was after collapsing the following evening.
How many unprofessionals have you met? It's incredible. The long list of them just gets more and more by the more the conversation is even going on. And what I wanted to even touch on before, you mentioned the health insurance and all that, I was going to ask you, the bills surely must have been mounting and getting nowhere with all this.
Yeah, absolutely. They were just constantly mounting. But I suppose in front of my parents or my family, I was failing badly. And I suppose they were extremely, extremely worried at this point that we left it for a little while to give me a chance and a break from what was going on. It was just exhausting. Going through those tests, it's not easy when you're going through the same rigorous tests, and they'll just keep coming back. And you know, I never expected anything either, which is even worse. Every time I went in, I never expected to come out with any positive outcome.
And why was that? You were dealing with the best professionals on the planet, so to speak. Your consultants, specialists in every field. Why did you have no confidence in it?
When you've been bashed and battered and spoken to the way I was, you just lose complete hope.
The morale just went more and more downhill every time you went to a new consultant. You're kind of going, here we go again, the same old yarn I'm going to get.
Exactly. It was the very same thing. If they can turn around and tell you one day that, okay, there's a tumour on your kidneys, and then a week later, it must have been just an artefact, you'd swear that it was a freckle they were talking about.
Yeah.
And see you later. There's a little letter for your GP. Good luck to you.
And next minute you have a blockage on your heart, and then a while later it's not even on the system anymore. Nothing to see here.
No, nothing. And
sorry, is this or was this, I wonder, an isolated case? Was yours such a difficult diagnosis to make that, every specialist in the country was finding it difficult to make a diagnosis or to help you in any way? How many others are affected in the same way?
oh, so there has to be thousands. And I suppose it's the reason my story, they don't want it out there. So to continue on with it, they sent Leash Football actually arranged for me to see a herbalist, and I attended his clinic. The herbalist, when I started to tell the symptoms to, was quite concerned and asked, would it be okay if they got a doctor to come in and attend the appointment? So doctor came in, they examined me for an hour and a half. They could not get my pulse on my right hand side of my body. And they were like, look, you really should not be out walking around on your own. You really need to be in a hospital where you have 24-hour supervision to figure out what is going on. And they kind of left the room and they all conversed themselves and came back in and said, look, we can't treat you. There's nothing we can do. You're just too sick for us to take on board. And I said, that's fair enough. It was an honest answer and no problem. But they were like, we want to make one call before you go. So I said, okay. And they went and rang Professor Austin Dara, who has since passed away. Would he take me on as a special case?
In his 90s?
Yeah. So Austin actually agreed to take me on. So there was a bit of time before I actually met Professor Dara. And in the meantime, my own GP had been doing tests on me, a blood test, all the usual. And he called me in one day, sat me down in front of him, and he turned around and he said, look, I'm really sorry, Grace, but you're gone into liver failure and you're going to have a horrific death.
How did that hit you when you got that information?
Actually, you're just shocked. Well, first of all, actually, what he did was he handed me the page with the results on the page. And sure, it meant nothing to me. All I could see was figures and numbers. And I just looked at it. My mom was with me and I handed it to her. And he said, yeah, I'm really, really sorry, but it's liver failure. And it is going to be horrific death.
And what age were you at this stage?
I was 25 or 26. This was shortly after my hospital stint. So all of this was in quite a short space of time. So I went home and, it was probably the first time I seen my father cry over it. I suppose the shock of it. They weren't giving me much time to live at this stage. So when you're going into your GP, you don't expect to be hit with, a terminal illness.
But the diagnosis, on what grounds did he say you were, why did he say you were going into liver failure? Was there a scan, an MRI?
Blood test.
A blood test?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was actually left like that for a full month, thinking I was dying.
Were you treated for liver failure?
No, because they had to do follow-up tests. So being left like that for a month, they came back and said, you know what? Yeah, we gave you the wrong results. Those results belong to somebody else.
Oh.
So someone else got good news and I was getting...
What the hell?
Yeah. So a full month went by knowing that I didn't have much time left to be then phoning up to go, come back in again for more. Like I had done a series of tests and then they said, look, you've got the wrong ones. And it's all done as if we're just having a chat and it means nothing.
Just very casual,
Yeah, and then I was told that, you're half the girl now that you were when you came in here originally. So we now want to put you on antidepressants and we now want you to go see a counsellor. So thankfully, my mind was still intact. And I said, no, I will not be going on antidepressants. The only reason I'm like this is because you can't figure out what's wrong with me. And no to any of that. So I told him to keep them. He wouldn't even write. I said, don't even write me out a prescription. I won't be doing anything with it. And I got up and left. And they actually refused to let my father in on the appointment that day afterwards.
Incredible.
Isn't it?
Well, football must have had some impact on your life to be able to deal with that incredible story with all the failings and what have you. I just don't know how psychologically, mentally, you dealt with that.
Yeah, I think football and the training I did at such a young age, at such a high level, it was always serious. You were always being pushed. You always had to kind of get through a pain threshold or pain barrier, and you always had that hard winter slog of training, and the summer and spring you'd be super fit and everything would be great. And I always put everything back down to that. Right, I have to get through this part to get here, and this miserable part is what I have to get through just to reach where I want to be.
It's serious mental focus to have in a human being, like being given that information alone. You know, most people, when you often hear of a case when they see the GP in the white coat and all that, and they say, "Oh, sorry, you have 2 weeks to live." Well, you know, there's a good chance they'll die within those 2 weeks, or even less, because the shock of that alone and the power of the mind that a guy in a white basically suit has said it kills the person. I've heard it many, many times before. So if you were to say so strong throughout all that, I mean, it's amazing. It's incredible in itself.
Well, I think you had perhaps a special sort of job to do.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I was just taking this.
Thankfully, you're here today telling us.
It's funny, like, I suppose it's a few years ago now, but as we're talking about it now and it's coming to the forefront, you do kind of realize or stop to think then, going, God, how bad it really, really was. And it only gets worse, like the next few years even get worse.
More and more.
Yeah. So
until you met this fine man beside you.
Yes, yeah. Of course. But on top of all that, you were diagnosed with Lyme disease and 8 co-infections, which you were treated for in Germany.
Well, actually, before we even get to that.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
I met Professor Dara, an exceptional man. And if I was to say, he was hands down the best medic I have ever met. And when I went into him, straight away, he turned around and he said, "Grace, you have a thyroid problem, and I can guarantee you do." And I said, "All right, well, it's been tested for the last 8 years and they've told me every time it's perfect." Yeah. He's like, "I'm telling you it's not." So he said, "Look, I'm going to start my tests on you now." And he did, and he sent them off to France. And my results came back. And they were frightening, actually, because I had reverse T3 thyroid problem, which basically means that it was blocking the production of T4, which in turn was shutting down all my organs. And I had, before waiting on those results, I had been still trying to play some sport in between all this, and I was talked out to play centre forward for my club in a club championship game. And I was very much struggling in the warm-up and grey, and my mother was on the sideline and obviously could see how bad I was getting just even throughout the warm-up, and she told me afterwards that she was braying on the sideline the game wouldn't go ahead. And it's the only senior game I have ever seen where a referee didn't show up. And I met Professor Dara the following day, and he said if that game had gone ahead, you would have been dead on the field.
The good Lord was watching you.
He said there's no way you would have survived that day. Yeah. And I was diagnosed with reverse T3, and I was gone into organ failure.
Well, maybe it may be of some advantage to someone listening to this podcast that the conventional test, thyroid test, and this had been done numerous times over the years, and it showed nothing. I believe that T1, 2, 3, 4 are the only tests, as Austin Dara confirmed, that would give a true reading of the function of the thyroid. Because T3, the cortisols were blocking T4 and shutting down her organs. So it may be of some benefit to someone out there who may find themselves in similar circumstances, do a T1, 2, 3, 4.
Grace, you're like a cat with 9 lives. And as we get closer to the present day, where does Matthew play a role in all this?
So yeah, after that I did this treatment for
Lyme.
I spent then the next 2 years, I suppose, doing trial antibiotics and treatment. The doctors would pick out the MIMS book what antibiotics I would get, and I would have a PICC line inserted, and we would do trial antibiotics for a month. And then we'd go, right, those ones didn't work, we'll go for another trial. And we'd pick another trial, a guinea pig. And I ended up in and out of hospital all of the time. The lines got infected a couple of occasions. And then throughout all those trials of medication, there was a lot of medication.
28 tablets a day at that time.
I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease and 8 infections then in Germany, on top of all those other diagnoses that I've just mentioned over the last.
And you couldn't work or do anything at this stage either?
No, I stayed going. I gave up being self-employed, could no longer do it, and I got a permanent job, and I did that as best I could. Gave everything to my job. I suppose mentally it kept me going.
But at that stage you were able to work from home.
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed with the chronic Lyme disease, the company I was with decided that they would let me take time out to just get the treatment. The treatment was severe. I was on 28 tablets a day plus IV every second day, which was actually sent to me from Germany. It was too strong that they couldn't get it in Ireland. So yeah, it was sent over. It was horrific. I can send you a video of that treatment after this, and you can share it with everybody, and it'll actually give people an idea of how sick I probably was. Look at me now, it's a different story. I look like a completely different person. As my father would say, he couldn't bring me out in public because they would have me arrested. He'd be arrested for cruelty to kids. I look like a little alien. I couldn't eat anything. I had 24-hour care, stone cold all of the time. My eyesight was going. I couldn't hold a conversation. Yeah, it was really, really bad. When I was just before my 30th birthday, going through all this treatment, the Irish consultant pulled me aside and said, look, Grace, you're on a maintenance program at this stage. We don't know how long you will survive for. And we think you should stop all your treatment now and see how long you survive for. So that was a bit of a shock. I didn't want to do it because I wanted to live, but I knew the treatment was killing me. And it was a decision, I suppose, I had to make with my family, and he sent me away to do it. And we continued it for another little while. And luckily, my mother was sleeping with me at this point. They would carry me from the bed to the bathroom, even though none of those functions actually worked. None of them, they were all shutting down. So if I had to go from the bed to the couch, I would be linked to it. And they would have to spend the night with me in case I died of a heart attack in the middle of the night. So, and all of this was done from home by my parents. They had to care for me, had to do the treatment because my health insurance didn't cover me to stay in the Blackrock Clinic. I was told, yes, you can be admitted, and I got a phone call from the hospital, and my consultant wanted me admitted, but he only worked, he was friends of Austin's, so Austin, he was no longer obviously in the treating people in the hospital, so his friend took me on. And he wanted me admitted, but he only worked there because he was semi-retired. So they rang and said, look, it's a 5,000 deposit for you to be admitted, and it's €1,500 a night, bread and breakfast.
Hilton wouldn't even charge that.
I know. So my parents actually had to do it at home. So we didn't have palliative care. We didn't have, because they had to do everything. And that was the scenario. And my mother couldn't cope one day, and she was struggling to look after me. I suppose they were just watching me die, really. And she went into our GP, but the GP wasn't there that day, and she met somebody else. And, thank God she did, because that person saved my life. And Mom explained my story, and she just said, look, I know somebody that can help her. And she said, look, if Matthew Lennon can't do it, nobody can. And on the prescription, they're computerized. She ripped off the prescription and she wrote Matthew's name and number on the back of the prescription. And my mother still has it wrapped up. And it's like a piece of gold in our house. And Mom came out and she rang me and she said, I was in hospital to see every Thursday because I had PICC lines in, so I had to be monitored in oncology. And so I was actually being looked after in Dublin that day, and she rang and she said, look, will you ring this man if you have any interest? And I said, yeah, give me his number. And I can tell you to this day, it was a Friday afternoon that I rang him, and we had a chat, and he knew all about my condition, all about the medication I had been on. And he said, come down on the Monday. And we went down on the Monday, and I was carried in to his waiting room, and the place was packed, and I was freezing cold, couldn't talk. The people in the waiting room, the noise of it was just going through my head. And I suppose, when you've been kind of on your own most of the time, or with your family, and they know they're used to looking at you, but when you're going to a room and everybody's staring at you and going, the poor girl, or she's dying, or I'm like, I'm not deaf, but I know I can't really speak. So they went and got him, and Matthew took me in. They asked you, I suppose you can take over from here.
At this stage, Grace, were you given, am I correct in saying 14 days to live?
Yeah, they only gave me a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So no pressure, Matthew, so.
No, none at all. I can tell you that on that date, there was pressure. But you're recommended by a doctor.
Yeah.
A medical doctor.
Yeah.
Who said, after going through 10 years of treatment, no hope whatsoever.
Yeah.
You were in organ failure, literally, when you came. You had your cap pulled down, you were trembling with the cold, the place was warm, it was full, and some of the lady says, take this young lady next. And we did. And I suppose I'd like you to tell Chris what happened when you came into the clinic first. You were in with, was there your mum?
Mum, yeah.
And someone else as well?
No, that day it was just myself.
Right, and what happened? What did I ask you to do?
So yeah, and you can clearly envisage the state I was in, and Matthew asked me to jog on the spot after going so much through some of the actual problems, and my mother outlining what was wrong. He just said, will you jog on the spot? And of course I did.
Well, after all, you've been training for 10, 15, maybe more years, so you were just about able to put one foot past the other.
My mother was like, oh my God, he's going to kill her off altogether. And I did. I suppose that's where that thickness comes through. And at that stage, I couldn't catch my breath, couldn't yawn, could hardly breathe. And Matthew started to work with me. Yeah. And no matter what it took from that appointment on, I was going to do it. And he gave it everything I had. I would have crawled. And I often hear people saying, I'm too sick to go. And I'm like, you can never be too sick to go. Like, I was carried, and I would have crawled to get there, just to live. That's all I wanted to do.
And at this stage, did you feel you were at your wit's end, that you really felt in your heart that Matthew really is the final outcome for me? That's it. Like, if he can't do it, like you once said, that that's kind of it.
I knew that was it. I had nothing else. Shortly after I seen Matthew on a couple of sessions, I was still going through the treatment. I had decided to keep it on just to see. I just didn't want to give up on myself. And the Germans just contacted me because I had to have tests done for them every week or every 2 weeks. And they said, look, you immediately need to come off all treatment. Stop everything. If you have one more dose of treatment, you're going to die on the spot. My blood count had dropped so low that they were like, yeah, straight away come off everything. And I did then. I stopped everything. And after you were working with me, you sent me back to the medics again. Because Matthew had actually discovered that I had a breast lump on the right-hand side, which hadn't been detected by anybody, even though I had been in horrendous pain in that area, but nobody had paid attention to it. I suppose I wasn't actually able to wash myself. My mother had to do it. I wasn't able to wash my hair had fallen out. And back to the medics, my old consultant had been away on holidays, and because I was in oncology anyway, I said it to them and they had a look, and they brought down a couple of doctors to examine it, and they said yes, there's a serious problem and a serious lump there, and they wanted me immediately to go for more and more tests. They told me that the lump was 3.5, and I refused to go for the test that day. The first one was 350, and it was on and on and on, so on. And I said, look, you have sent me home to die. At this stage, what is the point in me going for further tests? And more treatment that I've already been just taken off one to say if I have another one, I'm going to die on the spot. So, yeah, they wrote out a letter for my own GP. And do you know what? He's never seen it. It's folded up in my room. I showed you about a year ago for the first time I thought of it. I said, you know what, that letter is in my room. I got it and there's not a mark on the page. You know, if you've had something for years, it's crumpled and yeah, it's in pristine condition. I've never seen it, didn't even know the size of it until, recent years. Never looked at it again. Once they told me that day, it just had gone out of my head that I didn't care. I suppose you get to the point that you don't care anymore. I didn't care.
Maybe it might be helpful here to tell Chris about the actual diagnosis. No one told me you had a breast lump.
No, so I didn't know myself.
You didn't?
No, you told me.
Okay. You might find that strange and difficult to believe. But as a healer, I have the tools, I suppose, to make my own diagnosis and prognosis of the situation. And you've worked with me now long enough to know that each and every person that perhaps walks into the room, I make a diagnosis. Yeah. And I may say, oh, look, my headache. I've had this headache for 5 years and the medics can do nothing at all about it. And they call it cluster headache, so they call it whatever, as an example. And from my own diagnosis, I look at the situation of the patient, and I think your problem is maybe in your stomach, in your lung, in your heart, wherever. And I mention this, and in some cases I say, oh, no, this is my headache. And look, I treat it according to my own diagnosis, just the same as I treated you according to my diagnosis. You didn't tell me, you didn't need to tell me what was wrong.
No. And I had been like, I suppose, going to a better word, knocking back painkillers, dissolvable ones, because the pain was horrendous.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't actually touch the area, my face, my fingers, like it was horrendous. And when I came back to Matthew after being with the consultants, I just said, look, we'll give it a go. And we'll take it from there. At least we have tried.
Yeah, you've nothing to lose at this stage, literally.
No, nothing to lose.
But we always recommend that you go to see your doctor afterwards, if you want. I'm not sure what you did in that department, but I always recommend that if a doctor has to make any decisions regarding medicine or otherwise, go see your doctor.
Well, this is my decision. I'd been there for such a long time that I made the decision. My parents didn't even. I said, look, no, we're not going any further with it. This is what we're going to do. And they agreed and said, yeah, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. And I also had a PICC line in at the same time, which had to be removed due to infection. And a new PICC line had been put in place on the same day, but it was put in wrong and it was shoved into my heart too far. And it was done, they would monitor it normally going in. That wasn't actually fully done, and there was no anesthetic done either, so I was aware of what was happening, and I knew straight away that there was something not right with it. There's something wrong, and I pinpointed that there's something wrong. I feel terrible, and it feels awful in my body, and you're not meant to really notice it. They said, no, you're grand, don't worry about it, go home. And I was actually going to you for treatment afterwards, and
I remember telling you and sending you back to the clinic.
Yeah.
And
I barely remember getting actually to Matthew's clinic after the procedure.
And what did they find when you went back to?
Well, I rang them the following day to say, look, I still don't feel well. Like, this is awful. Like, my chest is pounding and I'm shaking. And they said, no, you'll be okay. Let it settle in for a few days. Bearing in mind, I've had 5 or 6 of these at this point, so I knew exactly how it felt. They were like, no, don't bother coming in. It'll settle. So a week later, and only for Matthew that night, I'd say I wouldn't have survived it either. Because when I arrived in to you, I went unconscious. Did I hear? Yeah.
So Matthew, talk us through how, because people will be wondering, it's a fascinating ability that you have itself. I mean, how rare is it that what you have? Right, from what I gather, it's been passed down through your bloodline, I suppose. But talk us through a bit of that as well, as to, because people can't wrap their head around how this procedure happens.
Yes, well, I suppose it's simple, really, in a complicated way. To make the diagnosis, let's just follow up on Gracie here, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I suppose medics would say, look, to make your own diagnosis is impossible. We have equipment here costing thousands of millions of pounds to make a diagnosis. They didn't do a very good job on yours, but okay. So I look at a person and I could see that Gracie's life force was virtually nil. So what is life force? Life force is the emanations of the cellular structure of the body that manifests itself perhaps in the form of electromagnetism around the periphery of the body. This can be, I suppose, monitored, maybe very much in its rudimentary stages at the moment, with the Russians using Kirlian photography. This is a machine that will actually take a photograph of the etheric field, which is around the periphery, in the form of vibrations, the auric field, which is on the outside of that again. And these fields, if you like, show the condition of the body unmistakably. If you can read it, or if you're sensitive enough to be able to pick up the vibrations, just the same as MRI, magnetic resonance, is able to pick up the vibrations from your body and tell exactly what's wrong. This is a gift, a rare gift perhaps, but a tool that I find necessary to do my job. I do other diagnoses as well, like tongue and whatever, but I was able to gauge your life force from the time that you walked in, when your body was in organ failure, shutting down. And of course, my healing ability obviously kicks in, and I do my healing work. Now, that would take me 2 days to explain the complexities and the intricacies of this healing gift. People say sometimes, well, what is it? How is it no one else that I know has it? Well, I suppose if you take an artist resonates on a certain vibration, and that vibration makes it that they can paint a beautiful picture. The musician, for example, is tuned into music, and so therefore can pick up the old guitar and strum out a tune and whatever. I suppose for myself, I have a passion about healing. My whole focus is on healing rather than using therapies, although I'm not against anything that anyone decides that they need for themselves. But my work pivots around healing, and healing holistically, and finding the root cause of the problem rather than dealing with the manifestation of it. In some Eastern therapies, you would find maybe like acupuncture, where you have a headache or whatever, a pain in your thumb, and the acupuncturist comes with a needle and shoves it into your big toe, for example, and hopefully cures the problem or helps to relieve it. My healing works holistically as well. I often mention food to people. I think food should be our medicine. But then again, our food is processed so much that it doesn't have the vitamins and the minerals and all of that. And so we have to take supplements. I'm sure that with all the medication that you were on, your body was drained of supplements. Mm-hmm. You weren't getting the nutrients needed to keep your energy field working.
No.
And so you were dying.
Yeah, I wouldn't take any food.
Okay. Healing has been in my family for many, many years, and I'm sure a lot of the older people across the country, and I'm one of them heading for 80, would remember going to the local healer to get cured for ringworms or warts or to stop bleeding or shingles, whatever. These old simple cures were used across Ireland going back to biblical times and before, to the Druids. They used herbs as well as energy healing, we'll call it, for want of a better term. And so my family could do all of these old cures. My granny, people would have a problem with maybe simple things like ringworms or warts or verrucas or shingles or whatever, and they would say, oh, go down to old Mrs. Lennon down the bog, she'll sort you out. This was a practice across Ireland, and I remember that. You're too young for that, of course.
I won't mention age now, yeah. So you were saying, yeah.
You're familiar with some of what I'm saying here. And so while I can do all these old cures that were passed in my family from male to female, female to male, and one member of the family can do these cures in each era, as it were. I happen to be that one. And of course, I use my gift for the benefit of others across the world, where I've worked in many different countries. Over the years that I've been working as a healer, I have never turned away anyone, and never will. Even though in some cases, people would maybe ring at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell me they were going to throw themselves into the river. And I would spend maybe an hour on the phone trying to talk that person into a sensible mode, as it were. And this was part and is part of my work. I consider this to be part of my work as a healer. I suppose in recent years, my healing has taken a serious twist from dealing with the simple effects of everyday life, like skin problems, cough, whatever, to the very, very, very serious illness, like brain damage, strokes. I think perhaps you didn't quite finish your story about your breast lump.
No. So after...
Can I hand it back to Gracie for this?
You can, yeah.
Okay.
So when I come back and said, look, we'll just give it a go, I think after about 4 or 5.
About 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, the lump was completely gone. The pain was gone. And to this day, 5 years later, 5+ years later, the lump has never returned.
Amazing. How much afterwards, Grace, after going to Matthew, I mean, you know, weeks, months, did you start to feel revitalized again and say, actually, you know, for the first time in years and years, something is actually working here and I see a lot of light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I suppose quite quickly. Like, I would have taken it in simple terms. Any improvement at all that I got was hope, and took it as something positive, and we built on it. I didn't expect to run out a week later and be super and have all my organs and everything repaired.
Some do.
I know. So I knew it was going to, I suppose, take time. Well, I suppose I asked the question, how soon is this going to take?
The obvious question, yeah.
Yeah, but I worked very hard with Matthew. We put in a huge effort, 3 and 4 days a week, never missed a session. And 10 months later, I was back playing in the senior county final. Amazing.
From being told, you know, go home and pretty much die for yourself 14 days and that's it. We can't do any more for you.
That's incredible.
I suppose your first sign of recovery was when you started to yawn.
Yeah. A week later, I was sitting at home after Matthew's first session, and I was just sitting at home on the couch, and I could even picture it now. And I actually yawned for the first time. I wasn't able to do that for a long, long time. I would be choking, trying to actually do something so simple as to yawn. And I sat in the chair and I turned around and went, oh my God, it's a miracle.
I can yawn.
But it was so difficult. It was such a difficult task.
Yes, of course, because you were in organ failure. And so, how does this healing come about? What is it? Where does it come from? Why doesn't everyone have it? Well, my question is, why isn't everyone an artist? Or why isn't everyone a musician? Or why isn't everyone doing
Can I answer that?
Sorry, yes, you can.
I think to do Matthew's work, and I suppose I have seen both sides of it. I have been terminally ill. I have gone through all the treatment, spent years sick, and now work with him, and I know what it's like to be on both sides of it going. It takes somebody very special and incredible to do the work that he does. Normal jobs, and I've worked in the corporate world, and you're dealing with a handful of people and you have pressure, but it's nothing like the pressure that he is under every single day. So you can imagine that before COVID, I was receiving 200 plus calls a day, all wanting help from one person, and all life or death situations are in poor conditions that there was no hope. But he has to deal with all of that. I take the call and answer it, but he has to do the treatment. He has to deal with the patient. He has to take the aftermath, everything, and run the whole thing. And that's across the world.
Serious workload to take on.
And the slagging.
At any age.
Yeah.
How do you mentally cope with that?
You never miss a hit, Chris.
No.
And the criticism, yeah. So it's just
But I think an interesting, in passing here in relation to what we're just talking about, the doctor in one of our clinics, can I mention the clinic? No?
No, one of them, yeah.
One of our clinics passed a comment about our work.
Yeah, he actually brought his wife, had suffered a stroke. Yeah. And Matthew got her going that she could walk without, unaided, without a stick.
On the day?
Yeah, on the day.
Yeah.
And
in front of 150?
Yeah.
Sorry.
And he hadn't actually said anything, and he just passed comment when he was leaving, and he said, I'm actually a consultant. And he said, I've just sat back and watched him work with all the people present. And he said it would have taken 3 ballrooms full of consultants to deal with what he has just done today.
Incredible. And I have seen many of your testimonials that you have on your website as well. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You're the living proof of it here as well, Grace. And it's unbelievable. I definitely recommend anybody to go check him out for themselves, because from ataxia to cats blind, and now they're not blind. And there was a girl that had breast cancer. There was a guy there from Ireland as well that the first time in over 9 years, he got out of his wheelchair to walk. I mean, it's incredible. The work you're doing is unbelievable. But what I'd like to just touch on, as we're just winding down the show, is what you're actually doing at the moment, foundation-wise, and to touch a small bit on, you told me before the show started, censorship. Of all people, you would think you'd be the last people to get censored. Fill us in a couple of minutes on that.
Right, okay, we've only got a couple of minutes. We have set up the World Healing Centre, Kickstart here from Poland, and we're delighted to be able to make this announcement. And maybe on the criticism, and you're dealing with that aspect of it most days, where your phone drops without any reception, when people try to contact you and the calls are diverted or censored or whatever. I think maybe you're in a better position to tell Chris about that.
So before COVID, I was getting over 200 calls, plus a day, plus messages, Facebook, everything, emails, to virtually nothing. People would, when they would get through to me, would say that I'm not answering the calls, I'm not responding to them. Some people have alluded that I was rude and wouldn't respond to them, but I'm literally not getting any of the messages. Now, we've even spoken to, say, somebody legal, and they were trying to get through to me, and they tell me when, like, the phone was sitting there waiting for the call, and they had to email me to tell me they were still trying to ring, and the phone was being answered somewhere, but not by me, and it wasn't connecting to me. But, you know, on the phones, it will count down the time.
Yeah.
So it's going somewhere. So somebody's obviously very interested in what we're doing.
Somebody's tapped into you, yeah.
Yeah, even my own story has been pulled on a few occasions. It was to be the front cover of the health supplements. It was on a couple of radio stations, and the minute the interview was done, it was all pulled to say that my story wasn't getting out there. I was even asked by a presenter on TV, could he be the first person to share my story and broadcast it? And I agreed, and we had a good lineup. And he went back to, I suppose, the producers, and they said, no, the powers to be have refused it all.
But your consultant was coming on
the
with
three of
us.
Yeah. That's what he asked for.
Yeah.
He said, I want to do it, but the way I want to do it is with the three of you. So from the medic side, the healer, and yourself. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it, but I have to speak to both of the men to see. And all agreed.
We were okay with that, but it never happened. Well, okay.
No, just that the powers to be have said no. So whoever they are.
What I find very, very strange indeed, the doctors, bless them, the nurses, the healthcare workers, the healers, the therapists, we're all in this with one purpose in mind, and that is to heal people. And for the life of me, I can't understand why the work that we do is being censored, is being cut. I mean, if I couldn't help a patient, and there are probably plenty that I can't or couldn't, I have no problem in saying, look, you go back to your doctor, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And that may be for the reason that I suggest maybe your diet is up the left here, you're overindulging in whatever, and you need to go back. I have no problem with that. And as a healer, my whole focus is on healing, regardless of the nature of the illness. People come into us with brain damage. There's an interesting story here, but I don't know how long we've got with you, if we're over our time or whatever.
I was just going to wrap it up any second. If that was
okay,
all. Yeah.
Okay. There's maybe Hannah.
Yeah, I think there's lots of stories, as you said, that are on Facebook. There's lots of videos, but there's also, since COVID, lots of just text messages that we have received from people that we have helped all over the world through video call. Their own text is up on Facebook. So people should evaluate and look for themselves. And don't, I suppose, take every word before you evaluate everything else.
Don't sit behind your laptop without ever seeing us or knowing anything about healing, and spit out negativity without even knowing anything about us. There are a few that do that. But anyway, they don't matter.
But you should, in practice, and from someone that has been so ill, I can't understand why somebody wouldn't congratulate somebody.
Of course, yeah. They're doing quite the opposite.
Yeah, I don't understand what people's mentality is. If we put up a video, why would you feel the need to criticize us, criticize the patient and tell them, oh, you put that on, you're an actor? Why would you not just go, that person is better, they're a bit happier, I'm delighted for you. It's their story, their issues to deal with, instead of, or don't comment. But we would put up stories and you would see maybe no comments from people, and I'm like, why wouldn't they be happy for somebody else?
I know, it makes no sense. No logic in it.
No, absolutely not. So I suppose we've come together now to set up the World Healing Centre, and we've a head office in Poland, and we've a head office in London. And I suppose we want to help as many people as we can around the world, and hopefully they get some benefit from the work.
And before we wind up, I'm sorry, Chris, but there was a little girl, Hannah. I'd like you to tell her story, and very quickly, a non-verbal young boy of 3.
Okay, well, Hannah, when she was born, she was actually a triplet. And
diagnosed with cerebral palsy.
Yeah, she had severe brain damage, and her story is actually on Facebook there. Matthew tells it. But the medics gave her no hope and said that she wouldn't be able to walk, communicate, or do anything. And she came to Matthew, and over, I suppose, COVID, we've also seen her through video, and Matthew's treated her that way. And this little girl is now 3 or 4, and she is now in preschool. And she's now the boss of the class. She is talking, laughing, running, and doing everything that every other child is doing. So I suppose, in essence, Matthew has repaired her entire brain. Now.
Well, I correct you there. I'm so sorry. But I am a channel for this healing. There's the good Lord that actually did the healing. I am only the slave.
You're the vessel.
Yeah.
The vessel, the channel, if you like.
I stand corrected.
And there was AJ as well. And
there was another little boy that came to us, and he was about 2.5 when he came, and he was non-verbal. And after he would start attending Matthew, he would actually get really, really sick. So much so that his parents would have to drive around in the middle of the night with him, because they just couldn't, nothing would please him. And he is now, after a number of sessions, and I suppose the parents put in huge effort with him as well. He's super bright, and he's in school, and there's absolutely no problem with him. And speech-wise. And Matthew did a session with him. This will just show you how different kids are. He did a session with him a number of weeks ago. He had hurt himself. He was running and someone opened the car door, and he smashed himself into the car door. And he was in pain or hurt his back or whatever. And Matthew did some work on him. And he was actually able to tell us that he could feel the electricity.
Yeah.
He's only 3, running through his body. And the heat that he felt as Matthew worked with him, and that he had absolutely no pain and was flying it.
And there were no blockages.
And why wouldn't there be? Sure, Matthew did it.
Of course.
But so simple.
Yeah.
But for somebody so young.
And with no side effects. The beauty of it.
Absolutely.
Lads, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on and sharing 2 incredible stories. I'd just like to lastly say is, where can people actually find you? Or hopefully they can get through to you on this phone number.
I'm not so sure about that one, but anyway, try.
They can try. I suppose the phone number is 00353 87 12 72 323. The Facebook page is Matthew Lennon Healer. We're on Instagram as Matthew Lennon Healer, and we also have a website. It's MatthewLennonHealer.com.
Perfect. And I'll put all those links in the description below anyway, so people can just scroll down through them and they can click on them. And hopefully you'll be going from 0 back up to 200 calls again. Sooner rather than later.
Well, as long as people can get through to us, the biggest worry we have is that somebody is looking for help and in serious need of help, and they think that we are not answering the phone.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's not
the
good.
case. Gracie is very, very conscientious about her work, and she spends hours into the night doing emails, texts, calls. You were telling me the other night you had a call at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Someone wanted to do something with...
Set up an appointment at 3.
At 3 o'clock in the morning. So there we are.
Wow.
Like on a troubled world.
So I think he saved my life to answer the phone whenever it rings.
Look, I wish you the best in your work going forward. Besides the censorship and the whole lot, just keep plugging away, because you're doing a fantastic job. And anybody that's listening today, please go check him out on the links that'll be given in the description below, because it's well worth it.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Thank you for sharing our story.
Well, thank you again.
You've been watching Mind Wars. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel. It really does help with getting the message out there. Until next time, see you then.